Okay, if anyone's wondering why there's a hedgehog on my head, it's because this is a ratatouille situation. The real brains of the channel are right here. You got me. This show, this new Korean show, Teach You a Lesson, um, it really fascinated me. So I started watching it thinking that, this is just an insane concept. Um, and it actually does work. It actually does work as TV. And also, Teach You a Lesson is a show about a man who is haunted by the death of his wife. So apparently, going by the history of my channel, I'm legally obliged to cover it now. This is hard. This It's harder than I thought to do vlogs. It really is. It's this mixed message that the show gives so much of the time that I just find kind of fascinating to talk and think about. So that's why I wanted to do a review. Welcome to the lesson. Get it? It's like a lesson. It's like I'm teaching you a lesson about teach you a lesson. I'm gonna teach you a lesson. That's very funny, very amusing. Please clap. Please laugh. Please leave comments telling me how witty I am. It's a show about a government department. Well, I guess I should go back a bit. It sets the scene in a vision of South Korea where the education system has almost completely collapsed. So teachers are afraid to go to school. The bullies now basically control the schools. They're like these mini tyrants controlling everything. The teachers are afraid to do anything. They cower in fear at the bullies. And it's just this law of the jungle, this war of all against all. But don't worry, the South Korean government, famously one of the most trustworthy and transparent governments of the planet, has set up a government department, a subdivision within the Ministry of Education, whose entire job is to protect teachers and students from violations of their educational rights. So what does this mean? It means bullies, for example, are violating people's educational rights by stopping them from getting the education they're entitled to. It's got this villain of the week cop show structure, this like police procedural structure to the series, where every episode is a different school, every episode is a new case, a new situation, and it's the same cast of characters, but they go to different schools and they find, oh, this school has been taken over by the bullies, and this school has got a case of these evil influences in training. This school has been taken over by illicit dealers of study enhancing drugs and all this crazy stuff. And this school is a place where the future gangsters of Korea are learning, learning to ply their trade, even though they're still in their uniforms. So yeah, each episode is this special ministry, this special ministry of education, the ERPB, going into a new school and basically laying down the law. The main inspectors, pretty much they're pretty much superheroes, right? There's several scenes in this show where the education inspectors are like jumping out of windows from the fourth floor and then just landing and then roll on the ground, and it's like they just, or they just, there's a scene where the main guy takes a stab wound to the belly, and he just gets up and then keeps beating the hell out of the out of the people who are attacking him. Like it's that kind of action hero vibe, except that it's all happening in schools. So yeah, essentially it's a villain of the week cop show about a government department with superpowers. And a bit like in a cop show, there's this logic to the way these stories play out that any possible action by the good guys, any use of power, violence, force, anything they might possibly do is justified because the bad guys are so evil, so sadistic, so dangerous that basically anything they do is justified. Put them in order to put the tyrants in their place, the student bully tyrants in their place. And anything they do, up to and including beating the living hell out of them, is justified. It's really good TV. It's very well structured TV, and the reason it's good TV is that um, emotionally, um, emotionally, the idea of the bad guys getting a taste of their own medicine, getting this like poetic justice done to them, um, is always incredibly satisfying to watch, right? So that there's an episode where there's a mother who has been pressuring her kid to basically go to superhuman lengths to study for the exam for medical school, and she like removes the door of his room so that she can watch him study every single day. um and he's essentially a prisoner in his own home because he's got to follow this unbelievably grueling timetable that is supposedly going to get him into medical school at the end of it. And then the what happens is that the inspector, the main inspector guy comes in, and he's like, and he makes the mother follow the program, and he's like, hey, I'm just doing to you what you did to your own son. It's like, no, you have to study for medical school. If you like medical school that much, why don't you go, and then you have to study all these past papers, and you have to do all these extra lessons. And it's the kind of thing that works on it really does work on an emotional level, right? And in the first episode you see these bullies who are just unspeakably cruel and violent, and so then when they get beaten up and brutalized essentially by these government inspectors, you're thinking, wow, yeah, get him. You tell him, special forces guy. um so yeah, it is good TV. It follows that very classic structure of like introduce a really horrible villain each week and then get them to get their comeuppance in a really satisfying way. So I think that's a big part of why the show has been so successful. It is kind of also it's a bit of a social issue drama as well. I think like it's trying to tackle some of these themes of students being pressured to study too much, and teachers not being supported by the higher teachers not being supported by the people managing the schools, not the school not taking teachers' side when they're in trouble, or not backing the teachers up when they're in difficult situations, or giving them the support they need. I think it is trying to get into these social problems, which again is a little bit of a it really is similar to a cop show, I think, in the way that each episode is like there's like a bad guy, and the bad guy also stands in for a social problem, right? So for one week it's a bully who is so bad that they drive kids to suicide, and then one week it's a parent who is so awful that they're bullying the teachers almost to the point of killing themselves. It's an extreme show. The plots are all extreme, and the situations are all really extreme and kind of exaggerated and caricatured. But then the fact that the heroes are then get to come in and save the day at the end, it does work. It does do the job narratively. I want to talk a bit about the reaction to this in South Korea, because from what I've read, this show, because it's based on a webtoon, caused a controversy because the webtoon that it was based on was apparently very racist and had a lot of really dodgy storylines in it. And I only found out about this after watching the whole show and then going and reading a little bit about it. And it was interesting because, of course, none of that's really present in the show. The show doesn't have like anti-feminist themes really. Well, it doesn't really tackle race at all. Like there's no element of race really in the show. Because every character is Korean. They obviously avoided touching that because it was just too toxic probably for the show. What I found more interesting though was the reaction of teachers, because apparently some teachers unions in South Korea really objected to the way that teachers were portrayed on the show. So the main reason I think is that, as I said, every episode is about a failing school that has to be saved by this the higher ups, this government department that like swoops in and saves the day. And so the teachers in every episode of the show are portrayed as a little bit helpless and defenseless and passive, right? They're just standing around waiting for these inspectors to come and rescue them. And I think that's honestly a pretty legit criticism of the show if you're a teacher. I can see why that would be a bit of an offensive portrayal, right? Because a lot of it is like the teachers don't do anything to help themselves, right? Just rampant bullying and rampant violence, and they just are passively, helplessly watching. But what was also interesting though is that the police, it's not just the teachers that are portrayed as kind of weak and helpless. The police are also portrayed as weak and helpless because in order for the show to work, the whole of society has to be failing these kids. Every level of society has to be failing so that this one single government department can come and save the day. There's a narrative necessity to not just the teachers being useless, but the whole of society. And even more than the teachers, I think the police are portrayed as completely useless because several of the episodes have a plot point where the police will be told these students are doing these awful things. They're kidnapping people, they're running scams, they're dealing drugs, they're driving people to suicide. And the police are like, oh, sorry, we can't do anything about that because they're juvenile offenders. But then when the ERPB come in, this government department, the ERPB, can force the police to not be useless and start arresting people and putting them in jail, even though the police on their own are just totally incapable of doing anything. We are completely powerless and defenseless against these teenagers who inject girls with drugs and kidnap them, and for some reason our hands are tied, we can't do anything. But then when these education inspectors come in, for some reason that means we have to act, and things suddenly change. That's a very long way to say this is a valid critique of the show, but it's not because the writers of the show want to denigrate teachers. I think it is because, again, in order for the show to work, the teachers inherently can't have this thing under control, right? Because ultimately the inspectors are going to leave at the end of the day. So, okay, the special forces guys are gone, but the teachers are still going to be left with having to manage those relationships with these students, right? And that's something that the show kind of addresses. It tries to show how the teachers are empowered by this kind of Federal Bureau of Education thing, whose whole thing is beating up the school bullies. So I wanted to talk also about the question of whether this show is pro-corporal punishment, because on the surface, it feels very, very, very pro violence against children, and that's part of the reason behind the controversy, right? Is a lot of people don't like the fact that this show is seemingly glorifying and glamorizing the idea of adults going into schools and then beating the shit out of teenagers, which I obviously don't approve of. If I thought this show was making a serious policy prescription of like, we need to bring back corporal punishment and start beating kids with rulers and canes, I would not approve of that. I wouldn't agree with that as a thesis statement, and I don't agree entirely with the way that the show frames the question of violence. There's a moment in, I think it's the third or the fourth episode, where the main villain of the episode, this girl who posts videos about her teachers on social media. So this girl who has been doxing her teachers is like brought to the front of the class. And then the teacher gets out a ruler and just canes her. And as she's caning this girl, there's this emotional music plays, and this swell of emotional music. Like, wow, this is so inspiring. And it's a weirdly funny moment, because what we're actually watching is just 1950s style corporal punishment, but it's framed by the show as if this is something inspirational, because again, the teacher has learned to stand up for herself, and she's learned to stand up for herself by getting out a ruler and dishing out some violence, which I don't think is really the solution to the issues that the show is concerned about. But the way that this seemed to me when I was watching the first couple of episodes is that it felt kind of like this is a form of wish fulfillment. It's almost as if you're looking back at your memories of these bullies who acted without consequences, right? And the teachers didn't do what they should have. And maybe you've been through something like this, where the authority figures in the school who are supposed to be protecting every student are just, they don't take the action, the robust action that would be needed to just stop the bullying and nip it in the bud, right? And they kind of tolerate the bullying. And I think I sort of got the feeling that if not for the creators, then for some of the audience, this functions as wish fulfillment, right? The kid who's the victim feels so alone, so scared, so outcast, so defenseless, that that the idea of having this handsome special forces guy come in, and he has the power to not just protect you, but also beat the shit out of the bullies and just give them the pain that they gave to you, and as I said, give them a taste of their own medicine. I think that functions as wish fulfillment, right? It functions as this retroactive revenge. Not just getting revenge on the bullies, but of having somebody with power who would stand up for you, who would care about you, who would be on your side. That's really what the show is about for me, I think. The show is about the idea of having somebody on your side when nobody else is, somebody in your corner. I think that is why the show resonates with people. And I think so that idea of having somebody in your corner, somebody who is your big gun, as the show says, I think that is what it's about. I don't think it's about the violence in and of itself. I don't think it's about... So that's why I don't think the show is saying corporal punishment in and of itself is good. What the show is saying is that a lot of people wish that something like this could exist because they wish somebody with power would protect them, that somebody with authority and power would look after them. And I'm not saying that's a healthy solution, that there should be some kind of secret police for schools or anything like that. But I think that's the emotional place that the show is coming from. And I think in a similar way to superhero media, you're also getting that slightly authoritarian undertone, right? Because the implicit message ends up being, we need this strong authority figure to come and crack down, because without that, it's going to be just the law of the war of all against all, the Hobbesian, nasty, brutish, and short life, but in the confines of the school. So yeah, I don't read the show completely literally. I don't read it as this is a policy prescription for what schools should do. I read it as this is what the victims of bullying wish for, and so by doing that, we're drawing attention to this problem that is overlooked, or this problem that is kind of accepted or tolerated, and saying this shouldn't be tolerated, this shouldn't be accepted. I think also the show is not just about having somebody stand up for you. It's also about the idea of somebody teaching you to stand up for yourself, right? So it isn't just about the helpless normal people versus the ultra powerful government inspector. It's like the government inspector is here to tell you that you're not helpless, that you can do something to change your own life. There were some things as I was watching that I really wanted to know, like, does this actually happen in South Korea? There's an episode of the show where there's a school discipline committee, a school violence committee, where all these people are sitting around a table, and they're going to discuss this report of bullying or violence or something. And then one of the kids just has a lawyer in a suit arguing his case for him. And then in a scene later, the civil servant guy says, "Yeah, there's lawyers now that specialize in bullying cases." And I thought, is this really a thing that happens? Like, do students really bring lawyers to defend themselves in school discipline meetings? I mean, that just seems crazy. But maybe it was an exaggeration of the fiction. Because the idea of there being lawyers who specialize in defending school bullies seems nuts, but maybe it's real. If anyone is from South Korea and knows something about this, tell me in the comments if that really happens, because I'm very, very interested to know. And the idea that you could just lock somebody up in a locker, and that no one would even notice they were absent from class, or that, because well, to give the example from British school, if somebody had been present in one lesson and then is not present in the next lesson, there'd have to be an on the record reason why they're not in the class, right? So the idea of, in this episode where this girl has been shoved in a locker and it's been sealed up by the bullies. I was thinking, why didn't the teacher notice that she was present in the previous lesson but now is absent? Because at least in a UK school, that would probably lead to the office being contacted, and people going around searching for the missing student, and people going to investigate, like, where did they go, right? Because if something had actually happened to her, then the school could get sued, right? So it seems a little unlikely to me that they would just allow this to happen. But maybe, I'm just curious to know how realistic this actually is from the point of view of actual South Koreans. Um, there were some moments in the show that I also thought were, I'll say, unintentionally funny. Um, so one of them is that, so there's two. We know there's two inspectors in the show. There's a guy and a girl, and the male inspector, that it shows a flashback to him first meeting the lady inspector. Their first meeting is she's running away from the school bullies, and she gets like cornered under a bridge. And she has all these horrible bruises and like and marks on her face, and they've been just brutally beating her, and she's like 10 or 11 years old or something, so it's like this gnarly scene. The main inspector guy, although he's not the inspector yet, he's just a guy in an army uniform, shows up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he goes up to her and he says, "Should I help you?" And then she's like too afraid to say anything, and then he says, "If you want my help, ask for it." And I thought, I know what this scene is saying. The scene is saying like, if you want help, then you have to be able to ask for it. Having the courage to ask for help is part of the process of dealing with this. But I just thought in the actual context of like the actual idea of this man in an army uniform witnessing like a 12-year-old being brutally beaten and saying, "Well, I'll help you if you ask me nicely," I thought was kind of funny. He made his point, but he didn't need to make it as she was literally cowering in fear um, in the shadows there. That was a bit much. Another really funny line, and maybe this was intentionally funny, was so the main villain of the series, there's like a recurring villain. Somebody told me about my last vlog video that I used the word "like" too much, that I sound like a valley girl. So I'm trying to cut that out and not allow myself to use the word "like." So if I catch myself doing that, I'm gonna have to teach myself a lesson and give myself a punishment. But there's another scene where, so in the 10th episode, the ninth or the 10th episode of this series, the main villain says he's dealing these illegal drugs that might kill people, because these drugs get people addicted, but they're also supposedly helping people to get better grades, so people get addicted to them, and then they start using them to improve their exam performance. But so there's just a really funny line where the main villain of the whole series says, "Hey, no one ever suspects students." Which I just thought was a hilarious thing to say, because almost every episode of the series up to that point has been a national news story about students doing the most awful things imaginable and committing, like, doxing teachers and stealing cars, and kidnapping girls, and forcing people to work in illegal call centers, and all of this is being done by high school students. And then in the last episode, this boy says, "No one ever suspects students." I'm like, are you kidding? The students are the only ones they're suspecting at this point. There's a politician who, he acts as if he's exposing the fact that the education minister and his son-in-law, like, they're doing this because of the fact that the inspector's wife, the minister's daughter, was murdered by a student. And so he does these exposés like, "Look, I found out that the inspector is the husband of this woman who was killed, and the minister is her dad. So they're doing this out of a personal vendetta. and this is this gotcha, this gotcha scandal. Like, they're acting on personal vendettas. I've caught them out. And I couldn't help but think, would this actually make them unpopular? Would the public actually hear, like, oh no, this man's daughter was murdered? I guess now we need to be, now I'm really angry at what he's doing because his daughter was murdered, and the guy whose wife or fiance was killed is now intervening in schools to make them better, and we're supposed to think that the public is outraged by this purely because they've learned that he was the husband or the fiance of a murdered teacher. I couldn't help but think, wouldn't that make them more sympathetic? The idea that they're going to be unpopular for this is just very strange, because clearly these students are out there terrorizing communities, and the police aren't stopping them. Only the ERPB is. So why would exposing the fact that they have an even more sympathetic motivation for what they're doing be a scandal? It doesn't really make any sense to me. Okay, and then the last one I wanted to mention is that I don't like to talk about plot holes, but this one does kind of stand out to me. So, spoilers ahead, spoilers ahead. This is a big spoiler, but we learn in the last episode of the show that the student who killed Nawaz's fiance, he stabbed her to death with a pair of scissors. We learn that the reason he did that was to cover up the fact that he was involved in this drug smuggling operation. So he killed her so that, he finds out, like, you didn't say anything to anyone. She says, yeah, I've given you another chance. And then he stabs her because he's like, ha ha ha, you tried to be kind to me and I killed you because now you can't tell anyone that I was involved with drugs. And I just thought, okay, this as a plan doesn't make any sense, because first of all, no one has been punished up to this point for smuggling these drugs. The drugs are this, like, endemic problem, and we've already established that the police are useless when it comes to dealing with juvenile defendants. So why would he kill a teacher, which massively escalates the problem, to cover up for the fact that he's smuggling drugs, when clearly killing a teacher is a much bigger crime? If you're doing this to cover up a crime, then the cover up is worse than the thing you're covering up. So, like, the idea that he's this supervillain mastermind is a little bit odd. Even if you did get caught smuggling the drugs, you would just be let off with a slap on the wrist, in the logic of the show. And it's only because the ERPB is formed in reaction to this crime that he even gets punished, right? So that, I think, there were a few weaknesses in the plotting like that, where you're supposed to think this is this criminal mastermind, or somebody who's acting like a criminal mastermind who's 5 steps ahead of everybody else, or at least thinks they are, but their actions don't make total sense. It's an enjoyable show. It's a very bingeable show. Yeah, as I say, I think it's a show that I really like how it's constructed as TV. The webtoon, obviously, from what I've read, had some pretty big problems with it. I think the show's definitely, almost certainly, a massive improvement on that. There are some very dodgy politics, some very dodgy educational politics that creep into it. But yeah, overall, I liked the show. I just thought it would be fun to get on here and talk about it. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. And thank you so much for watching. You're the best. And if you want to see more from me, like and subscribe. And Hedgehog out.